right, it is that time. Thank you so much for coming to my session. Going to geek out together on identity, business, product, and how they all fit together. So if we haven't met yet, hi, my name is Sutor. I am a product manager at GitLab. If you're not familiar with GitLab, we are a DevSecOps platform, meaning this is where you go to write software. Everything from writing your issues that make your requirements, to writing the code, to scanning for security vulnerabilities and remediating the vulnerabilities is GitLab. And I work on the identity team. We call ourselves Authentication and Authorization, which is quite a mouthful. So I'm primarily going to just refer to it as identity. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my background. I'm going to go through some shifts I've seen in the identity industry as it relates to business, give you some real-world examples of what I've seen in terms of the business shifts in identity and how we can take advantage of the new narrative, and then some takeaways so you can hopefully go back and evangelize this new mindset to your company if it's not already there. Okay, first I want to share a little bit about my perspective. I think it's important whenever you're listening to anyone's talk to have a little bit of background on where they're coming from. That way you can understand which pieces to take or which pieces to leave. So I've always worked in software. I came out of college, I was an engineer. I came into product accidentally by asking too many questions. I was asking if I could sit on the customer call, if they liked what I coded, right? What's the customer feedback? And they're like, why do you care? So I ended up getting into product on accident. It's been a great ride though. I've been there for about 8 years now, and I've been primarily in kind of a niche within product. I've worked on APIs, cloud platform level services, developer tools. I worked in CRM at my last job, but my past 3 jobs in product have all been in the identity space. And it's a niche that I like. I hope to stay here, and that's why I'm talking to you today about this sort of interesting aspect of product management. And on the side, I also do digital privacy advocacy. So I feel passionate that most people, when they download an app or plug in Alexa into the wall, they don't understand what is actually happening with that technology on the other side. So I try to bring complex, technical privacy and security concepts to be easily digestible by people as well. So I want to be specific. When I talk about identity and product, there's a lot of breadth to cover there, but there's sort of 2 main camps I want to call out. One is identity in a product, and one is identity as a product. And they're different. And identity in a product, one example is where I work at GitLab, right? We're not a standalone identity service, but identity is an important part of our product. And yes, we integrate with some of these people who are identity products, but that's not us. And obviously, you'll see these identity as a product are the big heavy hitters here at the conference. I wanted to compare and contrast sort of some differences I see between the two, because I think it's important to call it out, right? I'm talking in this presentation primarily about identity as being part of a larger product, right? It's not quite as difficult to tie business benefits whenever identity is the product. But what about whenever it's in a larger product? How do we talk about the benefits then? I also have a soft spot in my heart for identity as part of a larger product because I kind of feel like it's the underdog. Like, not all of us work on the shiny, glossy Oktas of the world, right? There's a lot of us who work on identity as a slice of a larger product, and that's what I want to talk about today. Okay, so let's talk about the old paradigm. And I have to warn you, I find it a little bit depressing, but we'll get on to brighter days here. And that is that identity is just something that we have to do. And unfortunately, I've witnessed this in some of the jobs that I've had, where identity is just table stakes for having a product, right? We're not going to worry too much about it. We just need to hurry up and get identity done, and then we'll move on to the parts of the product that actually are exciting and make money, right? That's the old paradigm. How we got to this old paradigm is I think identity in a larger product has some unique challenges. So it's not exactly clear how metrics that other products use translate to identity, right? If we typically go off of, let's say we go off of monthly active users as kind of an indicator of how our product is doing, For identity, everyone has to be a user, right? If they're using the product, then they're getting counted as a user. So is that meaningful for an identity solution? I don't know, it's tough. Identity is also just seen as sort of a sunk cost of doing business. It's really hard to articulate the value that it adds aside from security. So I'm hoping that after this presentation, you'll have some ideas for how you can better articulate the business value identity brings to a product. In fact, I think it's such a unique space, and it's so difficult that I recorded this video I took a screen grab of with my engineering manager at GitLab. This is whenever we were trying to get people to work on our team, and we wanted to dispel some myths we felt around identity. So it has an image problem, right? You're not going to be working on maybe the thing that makes the headline, right? You're just working on a piece of it that's a little bit behind the scenes, or it's taken for granted. Right, so there's a little bit of an image problem there. It's a black box. In my experience, anything with user, permission, login, it all gets thrown over the wall at the identity team, right? No one else wants to take any ownership over it. And there's also this misnomer that you have to have years and years of specialized experience in order to contribute on the identity side. So some ways you may know if your company is stuck in the old paradigm with identity in business. If you're only focused on security and scalability, and you're just kind of keeping the lights on for the larger product, right? You're never able to quantify what your identity team brings to the business. You never get any kind of shout outs. There's no release notes about your feature. There's never any press releases or blog posts. Like, there's really nothing to say, right? Because we are just releasing the things that keep the lights on, and that's not newsworthy. You're seen as a cost center. I worked at a company where I was on a centralized identity team for about 50 products that this company had acquired. And the first thing they wanted to do to kind of bring all of the projects under the same umbrella was to standardize the login experience. So everybody had to adopt the centralized identity service of the new company. That was my team. We were funded with taxes. Not real taxes, but each business center had to siphon off a portion of their profits and pay the identity team. And everyone knew about it. And everyone was like, you're doing a terrible job managing our taxes. Like, no one wants to be seen as a cost center team. And that's unfortunately part of the old paradigm of identity. Another sign you may be in the old paradigm is that you know that you're barely keeping up with the identity as a service provider. You might look at the Oktas of the world and say, gosh, if only we could churn out features that fast. So that would be another sign that you are stuck in the old paradigm, and I will go give you a different perspective on that in just a moment. Okay, now that we have all of that depressingness out of the way, the new paradigm, and I've truly seen this shift over the past few years, is that it's starting to become recognized that identity is a key driver of business results, and they're tangible results, right? We don't need to wave our hands and pretend. We can actually prove to data that shows that identity is driving results. It's not lost on any of us that identity is the first chance that we get to make an impression on a customer, right? It's truly the front door to our product. This is being more and more recognized in terms of it needs to be usable. We need to display trust to our users and only collect the data that we really need. And also, no one has to scale quite like the identity team, right? Like I said, everyone's got to use it. It's the first thing you use. If another area of the product is down, fine, it sucks. But if identity is down, you all know what happens then, right? The whole entire product is stopped. So there's an exciting trend I've seen happening where identity is becoming part of the land and expand narrative. Now, I've seen this done with a growth team. And what land and expand is usually there's a team at your company that has an idea of, if we get a user to sign up, and then they go in area X, Y, and Z in the product, and use those areas within a certain amount of time, they're X much more likely to become a paying user or to come back to the product, to be an engaged customer, right? They're clearly getting value out of it. So identity is the first part of being able to enable land and expand is the identity team. Once a user has an identity, they're a lot more valuable, right? We can know who they are. We can contact them. If they fall off of using our product and we have an identity for them, we're able to nudge them back into the product, right? So if you don't have a growth team, maybe these are some areas you can explore on your own, but if you haven't yet partnered with your growth team, I would recommend it. This is probably the one we're all most familiar with. Identity as part of security. It feels basic, but I'm hoping I can give a few points here that you may not have thought of yet. One thing I'm really excited about, and I think we're all in agreement after this conference, is that identity and security are no longer in conflict, right? I've given talks before where I talked about the conflict of usually if you make something more secure, it's also less usable, and that needs to be a balance. I think we've all seen with passkeys, right? It's more secure and it's more usable, which is amazing. But it's our job to educate about that, right? Identity can enable your customers to abide by the principle of least privilege. By offering granular access controls, we can make it so that administrators only give users the permissions needed to access, to do their job and nothing more. I've seen a lot of excitement around, this is more of an enterprise level thing, but monitoring your users' credentials and setting policies around them, right? Setting rotation policies, expiration policies, how much privilege you're allowed to have with a credential, like an SSH key or a PAT or something like that, and providing tooling for administrators around that. And then I think another exciting part too is the compliance story, right? Anytime a company is pursuing a compliance standard, the identity team is involved. At least I know it has been in my experience. And oftentimes we are flooded with requests in order to be able to maintain or to obtain these certifications. Well, think about the business value those certifications give to your company, right? That is a much different customer that they can then sell to after they obtain these hard certifications. Identity helped enable that. So let's talk about the new paradigm and what that looks like in real life. So how can you know if identity is being recognized for the revenue driver that it is? You're brought into customer meetings, right? I spent many years as an identity PM never meeting with customers, right? Now I meet with customers and it's our features that are being used to close the deal. You might have OKRs. If you're not familiar with this, it's sort of a framework where you can take the things that you're working on, those are called key results, and then roll them up higher to your company's objectives. And I used to think that these were kind of, wishy-washy product, whatever. But I really like them now because it makes it easy to tie what we did on the identity team. And then all you have to do is look at where it's rolling up to on the business objective. And you can say, yeah, we helped contribute to that, right? You're able to quantify impact to your company's ARR, probably the most powerful metric we can have. And I'll get into that. I was shocked whenever I started telling this story, right, of the impact that we could have as the identity team and that we have had. I was shocked that I got increased investment, right? I got more engineers. We're talking about maybe even growing so much that we split into multiple teams. So that's super powerful. You consider other personas. We don't just consider those who are logging in, right? We can also consider other personas who use identity. And then we also realize that we do have an advantage over those identity as a service providers, the heavy hitters. Our advantage is that they might cover from A to Z, right? And they need to have breadth. But we know our users much better than them. We can have depth, right? They're never going to have a certain specialized thing that only our identity team can provide because we know our user base so well. So those are the areas you want to look at rather than comparing yourself to the identity providers of the world. Let me go into some ways that I've used this at work. So here's an example of our tiers at GitLab. Core is free, premium costs a certain amount, and then ultimate is more than that. How we tier is at who the persona is targeted to. So core is sort of like a developer working on their own project. Premium might be an engineering manager with a team or two. And then ultimate is really the CTO or CISO who wants that really wide platform sell that we have. And here's an example of some features in the identity space that I have tiered. And we're kind of given the freedom as product managers to tier as we feel appropriate, as long as it's based on the correct target persona, right? And how we tie this to ARR is that we keep track of how many customers or prospects request a certain feature. We keep track of either their current license, or if they're not a customer, what license they would come in at. We keep track of the seats that they would buy. And then, obviously, people aren't saying, gosh, I'm going to buy GitLab only for credential policies, right? There's like 20 other things they want. So we divide it out, and we take an approximation of the revenue. It's not a perfect science, but I found that having revenue numbers is really compelling at the higher levels. Identity is a vital part of the user onboarding journey. I talked a little bit about this already, but the sooner and more quickly we can get someone in, the sooner we can start really creating value for them. I hate to think of it as like we're trying to push our users into certain directions in the product. It's really about creating value. So we only retain a customer if the customer gets value out of the product. So what are the areas that we can push them in or nudge them in once they have an identity so that they get value out of the product quickly? Identity and self-service. This one isn't as much about creating new gross revenue as it is about saving your company some money, which counts to the bottom line too, right? We had a problem with our SaaS product where customers were not able to reset their own multi-factor authentication. They had to reach out to GitLab support to do so. We kept track of that and said, well, we really need to build in self-serve capability for MFA resets. We did that. Our customers are happier because now they can do it themselves rather than waiting on us. Our support team's happier. They're not wasting their time with this anymore. And what we did was we compared the number of support tickets we used to get about this, compare the number now, find the difference, multiply it by the average hourly wage of our support team, and there you have your impact quantified. Identity enables analytics. I don't know if it's just me, but analytics is all the rage, right? And it is really important to have hard data about how people are using our products. But analytics are not useful unless someone has an identity. An example of what we did with analytics at our company is that we, once somebody had an identity and we knew who they were, and we wanted to get them to up tier, right? That's one of the things a business does, is try to get people onto their higher paid tiers. And what we did was we displayed a calculator once we knew who they were, and if they fell within certain parameters, we showed them this calculator that basically said, hey, if you did an upgrade, here's how much more it would cost, but here's all the functionality you would get. Hopefully for them to see that, hey, only for a little bit more money, right, we could get a lot more functionality. And this was the first time that a platform-level team had ever partnered with marketing and growth. So we did this, we got analytics out of it, saw how many people interacted with our calculator, saw how many people eventually inquired about upgrading their tier, and then we were able to tell a user journey and a business story with that. I hope I've convinced you by now that identity is a business driver with tangible results. And I want to give you a couple takeaways. Hopefully you can go back to your company and use this. I think articulating the business outcome of something cannot be said enough. I know I have been guilty of saying, oh yeah, this month or this release, the identity team released passwordless auth, right? Like that's great, but where is the business outcome in that, right? That is such a more powerful story if we can lead with the business outcome rather than just naming a new feature. A couple examples. The first one, I couldn't give exact revenue numbers, but it's similar to what I talked about earlier with tiering those granular controls at the ultimate level. And we were able to pull in a certain amount of revenue increase based on having things tiered at that high level. And what that did is it allowed our customers to meet their compliance requirements, right? Having broad roles does not bode well for security audit. So we were able to do that. And then the second one is not as much about revenue as much as it is about customer satisfaction, which is another important business result, right? What we did is we really polished up our automated user lifecycle management, and we ended up being able to decrease our customers' average time to onboard their users. Really, that is explaining what the feature is, right? But I think this last sentence is the business result. This is the result for GitLab, is that our customer surveys increased a certain amount in satisfaction because of that. So I'd like to encourage you all. I really think it's so important that we all participate in shifting this narrative. I truly believe in it. It inspires me. I hope it inspires the team that I work with. We're so much more than platform and keeping the lights on in security. Like, we contribute to the business. So hope you agree. Thank you.